under the code of wages, there is a lot of protection that has been guaranteed to the workers. And now there's also a central rules 2020 which has come into pictures. Now again, like I say, the rule further elaborates on many aspects that have been given under the code. For instance, the manner for fixation of minimum and floor wages, and understanding the dynamic nature that is there, and keeping in mind all the various factors that would have to be considered, and not keeping it just to theoretical aspect, but understanding the practical implication of the same, and ensuring that the intention of the code is actually met in its true spirit. Now there is division which has been done into three areas, that's metropolitan, non-metropolitan, and rural. Earlier it was only urban and rural, so we have created basically one more division for clarity purposes. Then there has been a fixation of 8-hour work per day and 1 hour of less. This are just minor changes with regard to your weekly working hours. Now there has been a detailed process for deduction, which basically puts forth what is an employer permitted to deduct, and there's a limit of 50% that has been put on this, which basically states that out of the total wages, the deductions can only be 50% of it, and if the employer wishes to deduct any further, then again there's a procedure put forth, but you cannot deduct more than 50% from the wages. That's the standard rule. Now, this obviously puts forth, the rules put forth a detailed procedure with regard to the constitution and the functions of the Central Advisory Board, which has been constituted under the Code of Wages. So the rules are basically just a step ahead, or rather an explanation to the Code on Wages that had come into picture. Now, as we have seen that the Code on Wages has created a very nice and stern mechanism that is there in picture for protection of workers throughout the various sectors, giving like a blanket protection to all of them. But again, there are a few tiny loopholes which might need to be addressed, I think, sometime sooner or later for the betterment again. So like for the first instance, the first point is the 5-year review period, like we have discussed, of minimum wages has not been changed. But like there are multiple factors like your inflation and the general situation of the economy which need to be considered. So I think the 5-year review period needs to be amended to include this dynamic nature, and understand that sometimes a 5-year review period might not be good enough, or might not be a good criteria considering your ever changing economy and your inflation rates in the market. Now second is criteria for calculation and determination of minimum wages. Now the key point here is that, like I've stated, there are multiple criteria that have been stated, but there is something called as a consumption unit. Now the consumption unit for a man in the family is 1, but for the women in the family is 0.8. Now this has been the same in the earlier legislations which has been carried on in the present legislation. However, there could have been changes that could have been brought in the consumption pattern or the consumption rate that has been allotted to ensure that there is an upgradation of everybody across, and that there is no sort of discrimination that could ensue here. Now, thirdly, the performance of an employee is not being considered as a factor in determination of the bonus. Now, there's a percentage limit that has been specified under the code that the bonus could be allotted from this percentage to this percentage. But I feel performance of employees should, or the workers should, actually be given its due weightage to ensure that there is quality. The bonus is allotted on a qualitative basis rather than like the factors are obviously important, but I feel performance of employee is an important factor which would have to be considered in the picture here. Now moving on to the next code that we have in picture is your Industrial Relations Code 2020. Now these are basically the 3 bill codes that have been recently passed in the Rajya Sabha on September 23rd, and there has been a lot of discussions around these 3 bill codes that is there. So let us try to understand the basic structure and understand the whole idea behind it, so that we have a better understanding of the discussion. Now again, like I've said, the Industrial Relation Code has been passed with a view to provide a broader framework to protect the rights of all the workers, you give them right to form unions, and the end result, or basically the end goal of this, is to achieve industrial peace and to settle your different industrial disputes that might arise or that might come into picture. Now, this consolidates mainly your three major statutes, that is your Trade Union Act, your Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, and your Industrial Dispute Act 1947. Now, the applicability aspect is that it applies to all the industrial establishments that have been defined under the code, and there are like separate thresholds that have been mentioned again herein. Now, let us again try to go in the same pattern, that is understanding the key definitions, moving on to the key features, and then analyzing them in detail. Now, the definition of the term employer has been changed or amended in a drastic manner, and there has been like a complete 360 change here, that they have basically included people such as managers, your contractors, legal representatives of the deceased employers, your managing director, basically a person who has a control over the activities of the company under the definition of the term employer. So the accountability here has increased, I think, quite a bit, and the kind of people that could be held accountable has also increased. Now, next that they have done is they have included the definition of the term employee, which was not there in the earlier codes. So now employee is basically any person who would be appointed to do any skilled, unskilled, manual, operational, clerical work, and so on and so forth in detail. Now, the whole idea behind introducing the definition of the term employee was to ensure that no person is left outside the ambit or is not entitled to receive the benefit of the code just because they would fall under the category of an employee worker. So they have defined both the terms in detail, in depth, to ensure that again there is a universal applicability and no employee or no worker is basically left outside the purview and would be entitled to get the benefits. Now, coming on to the definition of worker, there are two main changes that have come into the definition. That is, the definition of worker now includes working journalists. That has been defined under 2F of the Working Journalist and Other Employees Miscellaneous Provisions Act. And it includes your sales promotion employees as defined under the Sales Promotion Employees Conditions of Service Act 1976. Second most important thing that has occurred here is that the wage limit or the wage threshold has basically been increased to 18,000 rupees per month. So again, both these changes, or the definition and the changes, as you can see, are all of them are directed towards creating an all-inclusive environment and expanding the applicability and expanding the scope that is there under the act. Now, this, for the purpose of chapter 3, they have also included unorganized workers under the definition of an worker. So again, I'm stressing the point again and again, but the same thing, that creating an inclusive environment, ensuring that everybody is entitled to the benefit that is being given or provided under the specific codes or acts. Now, understanding few of the key features that were there. Now, one of the most important feature that is there is the concept of fixed term employment has been introduced. Now, as the term suggests, fixed term employment is basically when you appoint any employer, any worker for a fixed term that is there. Now, these fixed term employees are entitled to receive your benefits as any normal working employee that might be there. However, except your retrenchment benefits. Now, they are also entitled and eligible to receive the gratuity benefits that are there, subject to them completion of 1 year of service under the contract. So they have also included the specific set of fixed term employees who would be guaranteed the benefit and protection under the code, so that in case that there is any violation or in case that any protection has been required, that would be given. Plus, it also helps the employer in streamlining and application of the rules under this code to even the fixed term employees. Now, the second important thing that has happened is the rules that are there pertaining to your strikes and lockouts. Now, the strikes and lockouts can be done only after giving a 14-day prior notice, which needs to be shared with the conciliation officer within 5 days. And this notice would be valid for a period of 60 days. Now, the threshold of 14 days and the sharing of the conciliation officer has not changed much, but the validity of the notice was earlier 6 weeks, which has now been changed to 60 days. Now, there's also a prohibition on strikes and lockouts during and up to 7 days of the conciliation proceeding, and during and up to 60 days after the proceeding before a tribunal. Now, what is the key change or the key impact here is that earlier this was applicable only to your public service units that have been defined under the code. However, now the strikes and lockouts is being applied to all the industrial establishments. So the concept of flash strikes has not been given any legal validity or recognition, and if any employee or any trade union actually conducts any flash strike without following all the notice period and the criterias and undertaking the conciliation proceedings and everything, the employee and the trade union would actually be in contravention of this code. Now, there has also been change with regard to the layoff and retrenchment threshold. So this threshold was earlier 100, which has now been increased to 300 workers. So let us understand the implication of this threshold increase that is there. So as specified under the earlier code, the limit that was given of 100 workers with regard to layoff and retrenchment basically specified that any establishment which has 100 or more employees and decides to undertake any sort of layoff or retrenchment or closure of business would have to take a prior government approval. But now this limit has been increased to 300. So basically any establishment which has less than 300 workers can lay off or can retrench or basically can close their business without obtaining any prior governmental approval. So this basically tilts a bit in favor of the employer rather than the worker or the employee in this case. And another key feature is that after application to the government, if there is no response that is received from the government within a period of 60 days, then the application would deemed to have been accepted and the employer can basically go on with whatever layoff and retrenchment that the employer wishes to carry on. So here the degree of protection to the employer, the worker, has actually reduced, because this gives a free hand to the employer to undertake any kind of retrenchments or layoffs without actually having a prior government approval. Now, one more important key feature is that there is no permission or approval required, even in establishments which have more than 300 workers. In the event that there is any national calamity that has occurred, or if there is a power shortage that is there, and like 2-3 more factors that have been specified under the code. So this is basically a bit of a tricky gray area that has been under the discussion. Next is that the formation and the threshold of a negotiation council. Now, the code introduces a concept of a sole negotiation council. So basically, there will be one negotiation council which would be undertaking any sort of discussion or negotiations and will act as a link between the workers and the employer. Now, what have they done is they have said that any trade union which has like 51% or more workers, then that would constitute as a sole negotiation council. Now, in the event that there is no trade union which has this kind of 51% or more workers, then you need to have at least 20% of your workers as your members for you to fulfill this criteria. Earlier, this limit of 20% was 10% under the 2019 bill. So this limit has actually been increased. So formation of a negotiation council has become like just a notch difficult, because again there's an increase in the threshold there. Now again, even with regard to formation of a trade union, the limit has been specified as 10% or 10% of the workers or 100 members, whichever is less. Now here, one of the area which needs to be addressed, or there's a slight of a confusion here, is that what if there's a trade union which fulfills the criteria of a trade union and has, let's say, 10% or the 100 workers criteria that is fulfilled, but no single trade union actually fulfills the 20% of the members criteria to form a sole negotiation council, then what would actually be the process there, and how would a negotiation council be formed there is still something that needs to be addressed. Now coming on to the next point, that is the standing order. Again, the threshold for standing order has been increased to 300 workers. So it has been said that any organ or any establishment which has 300 or more workers would need to have a standing orders model policy that is there, standing order models that is there as per the schedule to the act, and again the code in this place. Now here the government or the appropriate government has been given the authority to notify any other establishment which employs more than 300 workers. Now there is no criteria here wherein the government could actually notify this for an establishment which employs less than 300 workers. So again that becomes a bit of a fix here, but the the rights of the employees are not per se affected, but the problem that happens here is that understanding orders, you have a fixed structure, you have a proper definitive structure of rights, the applicable rules and regulations that are there. So this in the end eventually helps you in understand, eventually helps you in protecting the rights of the workers, which I feel might be compromised to a certain extent because of introduction of this rule. Now next, there has also been provided constitution of industrial and national tribunals that are there for dealing with the disputes that might occur under the act. There is a provision that is there for voluntary arbitration. Now the provision for voluntary arbitration has been defined under the earlier legislations as well, but here the key feature is that the definition of the term industrial dispute has been expanded to include any kind of dispute that might ensue between the employer and employee on the account of, let's say, your retrenchment or your dismissal. And so the aspect of industrial, the ambit of industrial dispute has increased. So the scope of the disputes that can be referred to voluntary arbitration has also increased in a manner which I feel is a easier and might be an efficient way to deal with any dispute that might come into picture, rather than going through the entire struggle of the different sections and going through the appellate section. Like if any dispute can be settled by arbitration, I feel that would be beneficial for both the parties that would be involved therein. Now there has also been an introduction for reskilling fund. Now reskilling fund is basically a fund that is there for training of retrenched workers, which would be established by the appropriate government. And this fund would consist of contribution by an employer equal to the 15 days wages last drawn by the worker immediately before the retrenchment, or any limit as may be notified by the government. Now this is basically a protection right that has been extended to the workers to ensure that even in the event that they get retrenched, there is adequate protection. The importance has been given to development of skills to ensure that they become employable in the future. Now the second, the next most important thing is that the limitation period has been reduced from 3 years to 2 years. So the gap between which the disputes or any kind of issue that can be filed before the authorities has been reduced to 2 years. So this might be a kind of an order to ensure that if there is any dispute which has occurred after the period of 2 years, might not will not fall under the criteria and would get struck by the limitation period here. Now, as we have discussed, the industrial relations code is something that has been under the lens for multiple reasons. That obviously it extends benefits to the workers and employees, that is without a doubt, because that was the whole idea with which the code was brought into the picture. But the question needs to be considered whether it is actually striking a balance. Now, when you incorporate any legislation, you have to ensure that all the affected parties or all the interested parties in the transactions are given due and equal treatment and equal protection. Has that been achieved via the code is something that is being discussed. So now let us try to analyze a few loopholes or a few issues that are there in the act. So the first thing is that, as we have discussed, there is a restriction on ability of workers to go on strikes, or even for the employer to get into your lockouts, because there has been a notice period that has been specified under the now. The notice period was already there in existence, but like I said, now there can be no flash strikes that can be done, because the code or the regulation with regard to strikeouts is not now applicable to all the industrial establishments, like as opposed to the case that was there earlier. So the concept of flash strikes has been, like, has not been given the legal validity here. So I feel this would surely restrict the ability of the workers or the trade unions to go on a strike. Second is restrictive conditions and formation of a negotiation council. So like the threshold of 51% or the threshold of 20% that has been given, which was earlier 10% as per the 2019 bill. So all these criteria and parameters are actually putting a hurdle with regard to creation of your negotiation council. So now let us assume that there is a trade union which has less than 10% workers, and there's, like I said, there is no single trade union which fulfills the criteria. Then what would actually happen? How would a negotiation council be formed? So this basically might result in an unequal bargaining power that might be distributed between the employer and the workers in this case. The next issue that is there under the Act is that there is restricted applicability of standing orders to establishments more than 300 workers, as we have discussed. And then again, it would ensure, like the next point is that it would ensure easy layoffs, closure, and retrenchment, because again, the threshold there also has been increased to establishments more than 300 workers. Any establishment which has less than 300 workers can easily lay off or easily retrench or easily close the operations of the company, which might not be in the best benefit of the workers involved therein. Now, the restricted applicability of standing order also has a similar impact, that if there is no model regulations or model laws, rights that would be given under the standing orders to the establishments which have less than 300 workers, then again the betterment of the employees might be in bit of a question. Now, the government has been given an authority to exempt any kind of establishment or class of establishment as it may deem fit. So it basically gives the government a power to exempt any kind of establishment from the purview of the code. So even if, let's say, an establishment has more than 300 workers, but the government issues a notification exempting this establishment or a class of establishment from fulfilling this criteria, then even they are permitted to undertake layoffs or closures without obtaining any prior permission from the government. So basically, what we need to consider, or what has been under scrutiny here, is whether the legislation is actually resulting in any sort of balance, or is there any sort of imbalance that has actually ensued because of this legislation is